Good afternoon, everyone. It's a good afternoon, almost good afternoon or evening. See, we have different people from different time zones. And welcome to our webinar about making sense of merchant pricing. It's been a while since our last webinar, so we'll try and make the most of this situation. So let's begin, or should we wait another 2 minutes for some of the additional people that are joining us? All right, I think we can start. So this is a very interesting topic for me. In general, the topic of merchant account pricing or merchant pricing in general, it's something that can be a little confusing and maybe overwhelming at times. So I'm going to try during this session, which I have to be honest with you, I have no idea how long it would take. I'll try and break it down for you in plain English, or at least as close to plain English as possible. And the reason why we're having this webinar is because we've had about, and I think I'm not exaggerating, we had about 1 million questions regarding this over the past few months via our podcast and social media. And we wanted to do this for a very long time and finally gotten around to doing this. So first, I apologize for the delay in getting to this moment, and I sincerely hope it will be worth the wait. I also have to warn everyone present that this will be a 90% informative webinar, and 10% of it is going to be a rant, which is also why I'm not turning on the camera, because I don't want you to see me foaming from the mouth. But don't worry, I will let you know before the rant begins, and it's close to the end of the webinar, so you have enough time to brace yourself. So, without further ado, let's begin. The first thing I want to do is I want to set the stage and make sure, because we have from the attendees, I see we have people from different backgrounds and probably different levels of knowledge within the payment sphere. So I just want to set the stage and go over some basic definitions that I will be using a lot throughout the webinar. So I just want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that we're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So the first definition is an issuer. Now, this is sometimes referred to as card issuer, issuing bank. So there are a lot of different definitions or different terms that are being used. In general, what we are talking about when we say issuer, we mean a financial organization that has issued a card to an individual, and they basically give that individual the ability to use that card to pay for something. Now, the reason why issuer is usually referred to as, or very commonly referred to as, an issuing bank is simply because most of the issuers in the world, definitely the biggest ones, are all banks. So the same organizations you meet on the high street, they are the main issuers. So that's why it pretty much sticks. The second definition that we will be using is acquirer. So acquirer or merchant acquirer, or sometimes also mistakenly referred to as an acquiring bank, is a financial organization that is responsible for processing card transactions on behalf of a merchant, which is the next definition we'll get to in a second. And the reason I mentioned that it's mistakenly called an acquiring bank because unlike issuers, most of the acquirers in the world, definitely the biggest ones, are not banks. I won't go into history because it's not the point of this webinar. Historically, they were banks, but now it's no longer the case. So public service announcement, please stop calling it an acquiring bank. The third definition that we will be using throughout this webinar is merchant. A merchant, that is one of the basic terms within the payment world. We mean any kind of business that is providing goods or services and is willing to accept as a form of payment for these goods and services a card as payment. The last basic definition is scheme, or in plural, schemes. You will sometimes also hear this referred to as the card schemes or card brands or card associations. This means Visa, Mastercard, American Express, Diners, Discover, Union Pay, JCB, etc., etc. There are quite a few in the world. And card scheme or card schemes just refers to all of them. Now, I will be, throughout this webinar, I will be using a bit more examples from Visa, Mastercard, because they are the more common ones. And I will try and sort of highlight cases where things might be a bit different for the other card schemes. So let's begin. How does merchant pricing actually look like? So when you look and you break this down into different components and different elements, I want to start actually from the right side and start from the right side, and then we'll jump all the way to the left. So an MDR is an abbreviation. It stands for merchant discount rate. This is also sometimes referred to just simply as a discount rate or the merchant rate. This is what the merchant pays. So at the end of the day, this is what the merchant pays. So if, let's say, the MDR is 5%, that means that for every £100 transaction, the merchant will be getting £95. That is the definition of MDR. Now, how do we get to the MDR? Now we're jumping to the left side. So regardless of pricing model, which is something I will get to close to the end, there are three components within the that comprise and account and lead to the number that we'll get to in the MDR. The first component is called an interchange. An interchange is a fee that is paid by the acquirer to the issuer for participating in the transaction flow. So a bit of history, but as I've mentioned, most of the issuers, definitely historically, but today as well, most of them are actual physical banks. And banks make money when people move money or when they leave money within the bank. And banks had really no incentive to actually support card payments when they started. So the system had to sort of incentivize them for issuing cards, because what is their incentive? I mean, why would they do something that gives them no value at all and even detracts from some of the value that they are getting through other activities that they are having with the same money? So the interchange is basically their compensation for that. And we're going to talk a lot about interchange soon. The second component that we have is scheme fees. So scheme fees is a term for sort of a bucket term for a variety of fees that are paid by the acquirer to the card schemes. And we'll get to that also, and we'll start looking at that. And the third component is the acquirer or PSP margin. So that is what the acquirer or PSP earns on every transaction. Now, if you combine all of these things together, you get to a number. We'll continue with our example and say that, let's say it adds up to 5%. And again, that's why we're having an MDR the way it is. By the way, I haven't mentioned this, but if you have any questions or comments, feel free to send them in the chat. I will get to, at the end of this presentation, we have a whole section of questions that I will do my best to answer any questions or comments you may have. So now that we've covered all of these elements and we know how the composition looks like, let's dive into each component and start breaking it up. and see what it means and learn a couple of interesting things about this. And I am pretty sure that some of the things that I will show you will surprise and make it interesting. So, as we mentioned, interchange by definition is a fee paid by the acquirer to the issuer for participating in the transaction flow. Now, interchange is a very important term and a term that I'm pretty sure that you've all heard at some point or another, because at the core of every pricing model that exists in the card payment world, we see the interchange. Interchange fees, and this is something that people are usually not aware of. Interchange fees are not a secret, so they are publicly available. I've included here on screen two links, one to Visa and the other one to Mastercard, where you can just go in. You can also just Google interchange fees, and you will find links to where you can find them. Most of the links will point you to the US, but regardless, and you can check these out yourselves. Now, I've mentioned that most of the links will lead you to the US site simply because of SEO, but the links I've provided are for the European interchange. You will need to go into other sections of these websites for both Visa and Mastercard, and you have the same also for American Express, Diners Discover, and so on. If you want to see the relevant interchange for different countries, but we'll get to that a bit more. So first thing, interchange is publicly available. Anyone can see the interchange. It's not a secret. And I've heard throughout my days in the payment industry that a lot of people, one, they don't know that the interchange is public, or they are told that it's some kind of hidden knowledge that only acquirers and PSPs know. It's not. It's publicly available. You can take a look at it. It would be interesting to see. Interchange typically has cost brackets or categories, depending. So different card schemes have different definitions for this, but it's divided into different brackets or categories based on different parameters. And I've only sort of did a screenshot of a small part of it because there are literally hundreds of different interchange categories. Some countries more than others. For instance, in the US, the interchange breakdown, you can download it. It's a 40 page PDF. And each interchange category has a different rate, different transaction costs. And pretty much a good analogy to the interchange is to think of it sort of like the prime rate in the mortgage or financial industry. In the sense that it's the same across the board for every acquirer, every issuer, and every PSP, and it acts as sort of the base cost for accepting card payments. Now, I'm pretty sure the eagle-eyed among you may be saying to yourself at this point, wait. You've said that there are different cost categories, but if you take a look at the table that you see on the screen, the price is pretty much the same across all of these categories. So why would we have 40 pages of different brackets? And you're right, that is a very good question. And that is because, can we do drum roll? No. Okay. And that's because in the EU, and as I've mentioned, we are looking at the European interchange rates. The interchange fee is regulated. The European Interchange Fee Regulation, or IFR, is something that came into effect in 2015 and basically put a cap on interchange fees for domestic and intra-European transactions. Now, I don't know how many of you know this, but one of the hobbies of the European Union is to levy fines on American companies. And basically, this was a good excuse to do this for Visa and Mastercard. Later in 2019, they extended the caps to also include rate caps for interchange of interregional or international transactions as well, which means basically cards issued outside the European Economic Area, but used within the European Economic Area. So that means that when, for instance, let's say a Canadian tourist goes to a shop in Germany, so that is also regulated by the European Union. The interchange rates are typically, and this is on a global level, are typically updated twice per year, but they are already at their cap in the European Union. So the only direction they can go is down, and it's probably not going to go there. So that is with regards to the interchange. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So far, not very mystifying. Which brings me to the next component, which should be much more complicated and also more interesting, I think. Scheme fees. Typically, when everyone is talking about fees in payments, they're talking about the interchange because that's the big thing that everybody knows, and it's there, and everyone is talking about this. And people don't often mention scheme fees, but scheme fees are much more, I would argue, scheme fees are much more important than the interchange for a variety of reasons. First of all, in contrast to the interchange, scheme fees are unregulated fees charged by the card schemes. So these are fees that the card schemes themselves charge. And unlike interchange, which is updated twice a year, the card schemes are free to basically update them whenever they want to, and they do. In addition to that, each card scheme has different fees with different names, different reasons on why they're charging them, different rates, and they have no connection whatsoever to each other. Whereas when we look at the interchange, in the interchange, most of the categories would be pretty similar between, so I would say 99% of the categories would be similar across the card schemes, with the only exceptions being if a certain card scheme offers a certain product or certain card type that is not available to another card scheme. But today, I can't really think of any example for something like this. Card schemes, not like that at all. Completely different between the schemes, and they are independent from each other. So there are multiple things that go into this bucket term of scheme fees, authorization fees and volume schemes and market and innovation funds and cross-border fees and licensing fees and scheme reporting fees and AML fees. I've actually run out of place, but there are a lot of fees that would fall within that category. Some of them may not be relevant depending on your use case. Others would be very relevant, and you may find yourself paying all of them, and they are accumulating. So and they are contributing there. I would say that they are the main factor that is contributing to the cost of a transaction. So let's look at a couple of examples for, let's say, the top categories or top type of fees that would fall within scheme fees for Visa and for Mastercard. So for Mastercard, the top categories would be cross-border fees. So these would be additional costs that are applied for intra-regional and interregional or international transactions. You have this, for instance, when the merchant and the card issuer are not from the same country. So you will have additional cross-border fees applied to that transaction. Then you have assessment fees. These mostly are related to network development fees. Think about how to think about it and how to sort of make sense of it. Think of being able to participate in the Mastercard transaction flow as sort of a members club. And assessment fees are sort of your membership fee that you have to pay for participating in the party. You have a lot of different fees that go into this. For instance, you pay a different fee based on the transactional volume of the acquirer and the merchant. There are development fees if the merchant is based in a certain country. So Mastercard wants to maybe develop that country in terms of card payments. So they would charge a fee from everyone within that country to sort of chip in the development costs. You're paying for marketing funds. So whenever you see a Mastercard billboard, feel very nice about yourselves because you paid for it. And innovation, which is basically more money for Mastercard to buy new technological solutions and develop them. The third category we have is clearing fees. So clearing fees mostly relate to the movement of funds. And if we spread this across different elements, this means clearing. So the actual transmission of information that is related to the money flow, currency matching. If you have a transaction that is done in one currency, but the card issuer is in a different currency. Multi-currency settlement. So if a merchant or an acquirer works across a variety of currencies. CNP, which stands for card not present fees, because you need to pay an extra fee for working online, etc. So everything that is related to the physical or digital movement of funds would fall into that category. Then we have secure code fees. So secure code is the Mastercard brand name for 3D Secure. So you have to pay for basically participating and doing transactions in 3D. And you have authorization fees. So these are fees that are related to different risk elements associated with certain transaction types. So for instance, pre-authorization has a certain risk to it because it's seemingly a non-financial transaction. Address verification, account status inquiries, etc. So all of these are specific transaction types that have different authorization fees associated with them. So that is with Mastercard. With Visa, it's a bit similar, but you do have some very strange and different elements. So first of all, you have clearing and settlement fees, which are pretty much the same as with Mastercard. So they're related to the movement of funds within the network. Then you have mandatory service components. So these are, Visa has something that is called the IAF, or International Acquiring Fee. That is a fee that is applied to interregional transactions. And it's also another fee that is assigned to transactions that are reported as fraud or disputes like chargebacks, etc. And these would all fall under the mandatory service components. Then you have authorization. So again, similar to how it is with Mastercard. So fees that are related to the authorization of transactions. Then we have the quarterly operating certificate. So very similar to Mastercard's membership fee, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. If you want to operate, you need to pay for the privilege. And you have optional service elements. So this is mostly related to 3D Secure, which kind of makes it not really optional, to be honest, because 3D Secure is mandatory in Europe and is very commonly used throughout the world. And Visa itself recommends it. I don't know why they're calling it optional service elements. My guess is, I mean, it's a pretty old name, so I guess it's, it started when it was still optional, but it's no longer the case. These are the elements. So if you look at and unlike the interchange, and this is how I started talking about the scheme fees. So unlike the interchange, scheme fees are not publicly available. Not only are they not publicly available, the interchange, or you are able to calculate the interchange before a transaction starts, theoretically. In actuality, it's really difficult to do that, but theoretically you can. Scheme fees are only applied after the fact. So, and when I mean after the fact, I don't mean after the transaction is approved. You can find yourself paying scheme fees 6 months after the transaction was approved, because scheme fees are usually paid by the acquirer to the card scheme in bulk. So the acquirer will just receive an invoice. That invoice has all of the scheme fees accumulated within a certain period. And that makes it very, very difficult to calculate this. Next thing I want to sort of try and, because up until now, I mean, I've tried to make it as simplistically as possible, but it is a relatively complex topic, and we're only scratching the surface. So I just want to sort of provide you with some rules of thumb that would sort of help you understand, really caveman terms, this good, this bad, in terms of merchant pricing. So first rule of thumb is location, location, location. Location very much matters when it comes to merchant pricing. And we talked about international or interregional. So I just want to give an example of what I mean. So the two factors that decide location are the merchant country of incorporation, so where the merchant is from, and where the card was issued, so in which country the issuer resides. Now, if both merchant and card issuer are from the same country, in this example, I use Germany. So this would be classified as a domestic transaction. And domestic transactions are usually the cheapest. If the merchant is coming from a country that is in the same region as the card issuer, in this case I've used Germany and France, then this transaction would be classified as intra-regional, meaning the transaction is happening within the same region. Intra-regional transactions are typically more expensive than domestic, but less expensive than the international transaction, which is my next example. So we have a merchant that is based in Germany and a card that is issued outside of that region. That would make it an international or interregional, depending on the card schemes. They have different definitions for this. So usually what I've just shown you is something that 99% of people within payments, merchants, PSPs, everybody knows this. What people don't know, and herein lies the catch, is that Visa and Mastercard's definitions for what would be intra-regional and international are very, very different, and they don't even make sense. So what are these definitions? So Mastercard divides Europe, continental Europe, used to be the UK as well, but we won't get to that in a second. They divide it into SEPA. So SEPA stands for Single European Payment Area. So this is basically the portion of Europe that uses the euro as a currency, and non-SEPA regions, which is the rest of Europe that doesn't use the euro as a currency. Now, a transaction between two SEPA or two non-SEPA countries is considered to be intra-regional, while a transaction between a SEPA country and a non-SEPA country is considered to be interregional. So just to give you an example, or I'll give you actually a couple of examples. So a transaction within the European Union between Germany, a German merchant, and a Bulgarian cardholder is considered to be international transaction, even though it is done within the European Union, and it will be priced accordingly. And you do have a couple of weird things here, because there are certain countries that are considered to be within Europe that I'm not sure if anyone would consider them to be in Europe, like Turkey. And then you have countries that are not considered to be in Europe that would make sense that they would be in Europe, like Norway. But yeah, it becomes very, very complicated. Visa, on the other hand, yeah, let me just finish with Visa and then we can stop for a question. With Visa, on the other hand, the following countries are considered to be, and only these countries are considered to be in the same region. All of the countries within the European Union: Iceland, Norway, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, Turkey, and Israel. And that makes it a bit funny because if you look at it, between the two schemes, a transaction that is done between Israel and Iceland would be considered intra-regional, whereas with Mastercard, between Bulgaria and Germany would be considered to be international transaction. So it really defies logic, and it really doesn't make much sense. But it is what it is. Yes, what is the question?
We have one question from Daisy, I think. Do transaction, for example, merchant is in the European area and credit card is from outside the European country, still classify as intra-regional? For example, merchant is German and credit card issuer is Albanian or Serbian.
Okay, so the question is, I'm just going to repeat this in case some people missed this. So the question is, if we have a transaction that is coming from, the merchant is in Germany, transaction is coming from Albania, Albania is within Europe, the continent, would this transaction be considered as intra-regional? The answer to this would be no. Because I actually know with both card schemes, because with Mastercard, Albania is not considered to be part of Europe. I don't want this to be, political discussion or even geographical, because I don't really know why they haven't included it. But it's not part of the European region. And with Visa also, because Visa only includes the countries that you can see on the screen. So, and Albania is not one of them. So there's that. Of course, if Albania joins the European Union, then of course with Visa it automatically becomes part of the region. And with Mastercard, they will add them to the non-SEPA region, and unless they adopt the euro as well. The next rule of thumb is that the card type matters. And this is the second factor, the big factor that influences merchant pricing. So here you can just look at these two pairs. So a credit card would be more expensive than a debit card, or actually a transaction done with a credit card would be more expensive than a debit card. If you look at and this applies to both interchange as well as to the scheme fees. So even if you look at the interchange itself, you will see that, for instance, within the European Union, a credit card transaction would be priced at 0.3% interchange, whereas a debit card would be priced at 0.2% interchange. The main reason for this is simply because there is an element of risk. A debit card transaction is deducted immediately from the consumer's or the customer's balance, whereas a credit card, the balance is paid at a later date, and that poses a certain credit risk for which you need to pay. And the second element here is the type of card. There are a lot of types of cards, but in general, they fall within two main buckets. So commercial cards, where you see things like inside the commercial card you would have purchasing card, company card, corporate card, etc. All of these are types of commercial cards. And you have consumer cards, and here again you have different types of cards, like you have premium cards, signature cards, etc. Now you can have a consumer card that is a debit card, and you can have a consumer card that is a credit card. Typically, you don't have commercial cards that are debit cards, but it is possible as well. It's not very common, but you can have that as well. And it just adds up these expenses. So a consumer debit card would be cheapest and a commercial credit card would be the most expensive. And sometimes the differences can be quite extreme. If you look at commercial cards, and this is another thing to point out, one of the main reasons why commercial card transactions are extremely expensive. So we're talking about 2% difference from consumer card transactions is because they are unregulated. So the regulation on the interchange that we've discussed in the interchange section, it only applies to consumer cards because the European Union was keen on protecting consumers. So that's why it doesn't apply for commercial cards. And of course, if there's no regulation, why not charge some money? So now that we've covered all of these elements, I want to talk about pricing models. And this is something that typically everybody knows and everybody is aware of. And a warning to the faint of heart, we're coming closer to my rant. So I'm sort of preparing the stage for it. So the first pricing model, and it's a very common pricing model, depending on the country. It's a bit more, I would say, a bit more common domestically than internationally or in an international setting. And that is a pricing model that is called Interchange Plus. Sometimes you'll see it called Interchange Plus Plus. And in that pricing model, basically the way it operates is that the PSP or the acquirer tells the merchant, there is an interchange, there are scheme fees, whatever they are, we are going to pass them as is to you, okay? And in addition to that, we are going to add a certain markup. So this is why typically when you see in a price proposal or online or anywhere, you will see the Interchange Plus model shown as Interchange Plus, let's say 0.5%. Could be 0.6%, 1%, 0.1, depending on what kind of merchant you are and your business type and how much of a margin the acquirer or PSP want to make from your business and your transactions. So this is one model. I won't go into the advantages. We'll get to that in my rant. The next type of pricing model is the blended rate model. So the blended rate model is a model that says we are taking the PSP or the acquirer is taking all of these different components and is telling the merchant, don't worry about it. You don't need to care about this. You are going to pay 5%. And that's it. So there's nothing that the merchant needs to know other than the end result of this. Do we have any questions so far? Great. Very, very simple models, very commonly used. Again, as I've mentioned, the Interchange Plus model is a bit more common domestically, whereas the blended rate would be a bit more common in an international setting. Now, let me start my rant. I'm getting comfortable, getting my glass of water ready. All right, let's talk about how I got into trouble with the world. If you, one of the things that, if you've been, I've been in payments for 14 years. And throughout my time, I have constantly heard one kind of variation or another of the following. So you hear it a lot. I looked at a couple of videos in preparation for this webinar. I wanted to see what people are talking about, pricing and merchant pricing. So you can hear it on YouTube. You can read it in countless of articles that you as a merchant should always choose Interchange Plus pricing because it's the most transparent and fair pricing model in the payment processing industry. And overall, Interchange Plus pricing is the better option for most businesses. It allows merchants to take advantage of fluctuating interchange rate and keeps the payment processors' margins as low as possible. It's fair, it's balanced, it's transparent. And I think you can hear from the tone of my voice what I think about this, because usually when I look at this, my reaction is, really? Is it really that transparent? We have just gone through, I think, 30 plus minutes of me trying to show you the complexity of this, and taking this complexity and throwing that complexity at a merchant and telling him, here, we are providing you with all of the data, but you have no ability of analyzing the data, understanding its meaning, and draw conclusions out of it. That is not being transparent. What is it? I'm glad you asked, because there is a word for this in English, and that is called to obfuscate. To obfuscate, the definition of this, this is also, by the way, not just a webinar about payments, it's also the word of the day. So to obfuscate is to render obscure, unclear, or unintelligible, to bewilder someone. And I really liked the example that they gave of how to use that word in a sentence. It is more likely to obfuscate people than to enlighten them. And I would argue that this is, in the majority of cases, exactly the point and exactly the case of working with an Interchange Plus model. Now, I'm not saying that the Interchange Plus model is bad. And I'm not saying that the people who offer Interchange Plus model to their merchants are evil people and they must be exterminated. What I do say is that not every pricing model would fit every business type. If you have a very big business and that business can afford to have people that their full-time job is to sit on transactions and analyze them, to draw conclusions and to calculate the fees on every individual transaction. And if that merchant knows exactly who their customers are, and these customers fit a very, very specific profile, they use the exact same card at the exact same amount, at the exact same time, at the exact same venue, and the card schemes have not changed their mind, then in that case, you will be able to calculate your costs very clearly, and you can take advantage of an Interchange Plus model. And this is why I've also mentioned why Interchange Plus model would be more common in a domestic environment, because in a domestic environment, many of the fees would be irrelevant. So many of the scheme fees will be irrelevant. You know the interchange fees, except in the US. And you will be able to you will be able to calculate this. Now, I have been, as I mentioned, I'm sorry to sound old. I've been in payments for 14 years. I've spoken to thousands of merchants. There was not one case in 14 years, one single case where I've asked a merchant that is working with Interchange Plus, I've asked him, how much are you paying per transaction? And I received an answer. Nobody knows. And this is because the vast majority of these merchants have no ability of calculating this. And this is why I would say that for the majority of merchants, small, mid-sized, international merchants, a blended rate would be a better rate to go with, because in every case, and this is a marketing thing, because oftentimes companies come and say, look, you'll pay the fee would be interchange plus 1%. So what does the merchant hear? The merchant hears 1%, and you think you're paying 1%, but if you calculate the interchange plus the scheme fees, you may end up paying much more than with somebody else who would offer you, let's say, 3.5%. but that includes everything and is a very set price. I would also argue that especially startup businesses that want to know what they're paying and to always factor that in as a percentage of their turnover, it's easier to work with blended rates. In addition, it takes the unknown, so the question mark, and puts it on the acquirer or the PSP and not on the business. And to be honest, in 9 out of 10 cases, the acquirer or the PSP is better equipped to deal with this uncertainty than the merchant. And that is why I am not a fan of the Interchange Plus pricing. It's also why Fibonacci will probably never offer Interchange Plus pricing because, again, 9 out of 10 times, it's not to the merchant's benefit to use that pricing model. Not because we can't. It would make my life much easier. I always know how much I'm making in this scenario, but the merchant will never know how much they're paying, and that's something that I think is a bit unfair. And that's also why I'm probably some people on LinkedIn enemy number one right now. Rant over. We can move on to questions. I'm going to drink a sip of water, and Tamar will tell me if we have any questions. If we still have anyone still listening after my rant.
Yeah.
All right. So it seems that I was exceptionally clear or exceptionally boring, and we don't have any questions.
It was pretty clear explanation, all subjects.
All right. Awesome. So a couple of things just to end this. We will publish this on social media and YouTube. All of these platforms, they have also sections for comments, so feel free to send any questions or comments you have there, and we will answer it. We will answer it there. We also have just a small plug. We also have a podcast that you can. It's called Pay Attention, and you can download it on all of your podcasts apps. I'm not objective. I think it's interesting. You get to hear more of me, and sometimes guests. And we're working on the second season, which should be available around November. So thank you everyone for participating. Right?
Is it possible to download this and use it for future reference and training purposes within the field? I'm going to send an email tomorrow to our attendees with the recording of this.
Yeah, so Tamar will send an email tomorrow to all of the attendees with the recording and the slides. So feel free to use it. And if anyone wants to argue about my rant, I'm always up for a fight.
Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day.